Good Up is our space to talk about those experiences in life we didn't know we all had in common. We're the after work happy hour conversation with your best friend.
You good up bad, like, hello.
The place where you bring up the hard parts of life, the ones that made you laugh, and the things that made you who you are. Because who said becoming good up wasn't a little bit uncomfortable? Stay tuned for more information about this week's episode. Hey, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the Good Up motherfucking podcast. You know, I had to add that in there.
Yeah, had to.
We are back again. Season 8 has been going so well so far, and thank you guys so much for supporting it. I really appreciate it. Like, you don't have to listen to our podcast. You really don't. You don't, but you do.
Yeah, and that's a big deal to us. We really fucks with it.
Some of you take it even further and you tweet about the podcast. Like, there was a girl who every week, I think her name is Shantae. Shout out to you. She's also one of our patrons. Shantae will make a thread on her own page for every episode just to tweet her reactions.
Oh,
every
wow.
week.
Thank you, Shantae. I need to be better on Twitter. I think I need to create a Finding Deidre Twitter account.
I think you do, because your little
my housewives are coming back. My Twitter account has become a RHOP stan account. Like,
yeah. Deidre is on Twitter, but you would never figure out who Deidre is. I'd be like, who the fuck is this woman? And I'd be like, oh, that's Deidre. So Deidre needs to work on her Twitter presence so that she could tweet us about the podcast episode.
That's my homework. I'll create a Finding Deidre Twitter account so I could talk about the podcast, so that I can also talk about what I do outside of the podcast, and just for my shit talking, you know, on a personal level, as opposed to as an RHOP stan, because my RHOP account be so lit. I can't wait to dust off my Twitter account.
I'd be like, who is this person I following? Like, every time I see a tweet from that account, I don't have to remember that it's you. But
don't worry. By the end of today, you'll get a follow, and make sure y'all follow me too. By the time this episode comes out, follow me. I mean, you guys know I'm Finding Deidre on everything, but now follow Finding Deidre on Twitter and stop playing with me.
So yeah, either way, thank you and shout out to the people for all of the social media engagement that you give us, for talking about the podcast online. We really appreciate you. This week's episode, I do want to make sure I put it out there before I forget. This is a trigger warning that today we are going to be talking about abuse in all forms. So if this is a podcast episode that might be heavy for you, you may want to think about where and when you listen to it, or you may want to choose to rejoin us next week for another episode. Because as you know, with all episodes, we tend not to hold back. We are going to be very transparent. Yeah. And same thing for us. We're going to take this slowly. We're going to say what we can and what we feel like saying and what we feel comfortable saying, and we're going to just have a real conversation. But either way, just making sure that the audience is taking care of themselves and that you are aware of what this topic is going to be about.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think that it was important to come back to this episode because we recently spoke about grooming, and in our grooming episode, abuse kept coming up, because what we realized is that in a lot of relationships where grooming was involved and also tied to some form of abuse.
But so I want to ask you something, because it's something that I found myself thinking about. Wouldn't grooming be considered abuse? Because it is an abuse of power, isn't it? Like, grooming involves abusing your power, right? And manipulating someone to be what you want them to be based on your needs. So grooming is essentially abuse when you think about it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that that's the reason that it kept coming up in conversation, because we realized that abuse of power, again, was abuse, like that taking advantage of a situation where someone was young, or someone was impressionable, or someone just didn't have,
or malleable, as that guy said.
You know, realizing that was connected to abuse. And I think you touched a lot on your own abuse story, which is why we wanted to make sure that we came back and revisited the topic and kind of fleshed it out and navigated it, you know, the way we would in therapy, when therapy to be like, when your therapist would be like, let's
revisit this. Let's put a pin in that. Yeah.
So that's essentially what we wanted to come back and do. And I wanted to highlight a book that I've recently read called I'm Glad My Mom Died. It's by Jeanette McCurdy.
Is it good? I plan to read it. It's good.
good.
I can't wait to
right?
read it. I cannot wait to
It's
read it.
it's good as in she did a really good job writing it, but let me just say I cried multiple times while reading this book. I was pissed off while reading this book. The book
Yeah.
is very raw. It's very she does not hold back. It's her autobiography. So just kind of be mentally prepared going into that like there are some
Yeah.
things that are going to trigger you.
Yeah, I've been watching her interviews, so I'm definitely mentally prepared for how much I'm going to be triggered. Because even in
Yeah.
her interviews about the book, she's very transparent. She's very clear, and I'm like, okay, I fucks with it. So I
Yeah.
know I'm gonna read some heinous things in there
Yeah.
because she touched on it in her interviews.
Exactly. So I definitely want to touch on that book because that book has brought up a lot of conversations about abuse and how we talk about abusers and how we revisit our own experiences with abuse. So if you're looking for a book to read, especially connected to this episode, I would encourage you not just to support Jeanette McCurdy because she deserves all your money, but to read that book because it's important, especially if you're listening to this episode sort of from an outside perspective. I think that book will help you to understand the mindset of a victim of abuse, right? So we're gonna revisit that. We're gonna come back to that. But I want to make sure that I go into some definitions because I know how to do my motherfucking research.
Yes, she absolutely does. We're not gonna play my sis face.
So I want to put it out there. Abuse is defined as treating a person with cruelty or violence, especially regularly or repeatedly. And I would say a person or animal because there is animal abuse as well.
Absolutely.
So abuse, I think a lot of people associate it with just the physical. I've had friends who have been abused in different ways but didn't coin it as abuse because the person never put their hands on them,
Right.
or the person never like was very obviously violent. So I want to put emphasis on the fact that cruelty was mentioned because it doesn't have to be violence. Sometimes it can just be somebody being mean to you that can be considered abuse. So there are 6 different types of abuse, and a lot of different things fall into those 6 categories.
Okay.
So there's physical, there is sexual abuse, there is verbal/emotional abuse, there is mental/psychological abuse, which sometimes people put the psychological and the emotional together.
Yeah.
And then there is financial/economic abuse. And then last but not least, this is a new one that I actually first read about while I was doing my research. There is cultural/identity abuse. So
wow.
This one happens when abusers use aspects of a victim's particular identity to inflict suffering as a means of control. So people who often go through this type of abuse are, for example, members of the LGBTQ plus community.
Okay.
People of a
like
certain
marginalized
religion, people who are involved in sort of cultural societies that inflict abuse through like power.
So can I ask you,
your church can abuse you?
Oh, I know that. Would an example of that kind of be somebody who's got like a partner who's like an immigrant and they're like threatening to have them deported? Would that count?
I think that would count.
Okay.
And it would also count like if you are being abused solely because of your identity and a person is holding that power over you. So let's say you're not out. And a person is aware of your sexuality and it could cause you danger for people to find out. If that person threatens to expose it and that's their form of abuse,
that's so cruel. Oh my God.
And some of these abuses tie in with each other. So like somebody threatening to do something to you because you're gay or like to out you is cultural/identity abuse, but it's also emotional, but it's also psychological.
Like, got it.
There's a lot of ways that these things intertwine. So just to put that out there, because I think again we see abuse portrayed in a specific way. A lot of times it happens like if you see abuse in a movie, it's usually always intimate partner violence. It's almost always 2 people that are in a relationship.
Right.
But your friends can be the source of your abuse. Your
Absolutely.
family members can be the source of your abuse. Your teachers, like anybody can abuse you. Anybody who you have any type of relationship, and even sometimes people who you don't have a relationship with can abuse you. So
yeah,
just making sure we put that out there. So let's get into these questions.
You know, It's funny you said that anybody can abuse you, because I remember using that word at my old corporate job, and my leaders made it seem like I was being dramatic when I said, like, our team shouldn't have to put up with the way the travel agents abuse us. And they legit felt like I was being like over the top. And I'm like, the way they talk to us when they don't get their way is a form of abuse. Like the way they treat us when we can't make something happen for them is a form of abuse. And it's funny that you said like anybody could, because even like strangers, like I tell, you know, my team all the time, like, listen, you don't have to deal with an abusive customer. Send them straight to me. I'll take care of it. Like, I'll take care of that shit.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think that when people hear the term abuse, they'll be like, no, like, I know what you're talking about, but it's not that.
It's not. Well, because it's exactly what you said. Abuse has always been portrayed as this very physically violent thing, when, first of all, the word violent in of itself, a lot of people only associate violence with physical violence. If you don't associate like verbal attacks as violence and things like that, you're not going to see somebody being abused in that space. I think it's also just a form of disassociation, like, and just being in denial, you know. And I think the real tea is, I feel like cruelty and unkindness has been normalized, and people are shamed for not having a quote thick skin. If you can't, what's the sticks and stones may break my bones, but words never hurt. That's the most gaslighty shit on the motherfucking planet. And that concept is a big part of why people get so disturbed when you say like, yo, that's a form of abuse. They think you're being dramatic. That's just, you know,
I think
a part of it.
Emotional and psychological abuse still has the most stigma attached to it, because again, when you don't, a lot of people base their empathy on proof.
Baby.
And a lot of people base whether they believe something happened on whether it's tangible, whether they can actually see that it happened.
It's true.
So when someone says, you know, I was emotionally abused, it's hard for sometimes even them to acknowledge it, because it's like, well, I don't have bruises. I don't have physical bruises. I don't have proof that this person did something to me, but like, in my head, thing is I know that this thing happened. Like,
and you know, the irony is the reality is, if you're an observant enough person, if you're an empathetic enough person, there is proof in the way that person engages with you, in the way that person overcompensates, in the way that person is a little bit self-sacrificing. There's proof of emotional abuse, but we're just desensitized to it when you really, really think about it, because you could have stood up for yourself. that's what the girlies gonna always end up saying. But you stay. Why did you stay? Like, what?
Yeah, absolutely. And people need to stop doing that whole, oh, I need to see it to believe it type shit, because like, y'all, there is so much in this world that we can't see, that you would think ain't happening because you can't see it and there's no proof of it, and it's occurring and it's happening to people who don't deserve it, and you out here sitting thinking like, oh, well, if I can't see it, I don't believe it. You know how much shit you can't see? You breathe air every day and you know it exists because your lungs are opening.
Because you're literally alive.
I need to see it to believe it. Anyway, so of the 6 forms of abuse that I just mentioned, which do you think you can relate to or identify with the most in terms of your life experiences?
So for sure, emotional and psychological, also sexual abuse. I don't really want to say physical abuse, because my mom didn't hit us a lot. She, like, I know it's customary and common for people to be beaten their children. My mother didn't really hit us often. We got beat, but not the way, like, it wasn't her go-to when we were growing up, belittling us and screaming at us and telling us what wasn't shit was. So for me, it was definitely emotional and psychological abuse and sexual abuse, and you know, and minor physical abuse. So, but the you know, I know that I need to get comfortable saying, yeah, physical abuse was involved too. You know what I mean? But she wasn't excessive. She didn't hit us often. She yelled at us and belittled us way more than anything else. So those things, yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to, I think, pretty much the same thing. The emotional and psychological abuse the most, sexual abuse definitely. And unfortunately, I know way too many people who could also relate to that as well. And then I would say physical abuse, because it goes back to that. Like, I tread carefully when I talk about how parents and relatives utilized physical abuse to discipline me as a child, because I think the intent was not to abuse me.
Right.
But intent does not negate
Impact.
how impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, like, the fact that I was fearful of the adults in my life in not a respect type of way, but a fear type of way, because I knew they would physically put their hands on me if I did something wrong.
That's abuse. Yeah.
It was abuse. And I honestly want to spend some time talking about that, because I think that's a big source of debate on social media.
Yeah, it's huge.
So yeah, people debate whether or not disciplining a child or putting your hands on a child is abuse, because again, the intent to abuse the child isn't there. But in my opinion, if a child who does not have a full understanding of what's going on or how the world works does something wrong, or even when they know it's wrong and they make a mistake, and your response, instead of trying to correct them in a different, less violent way, is to hit them when you would not do that to an adult, then that means to me that you are doing this to that child because you are in a position of power over that child, and because you can.
Exactly.
Because
and I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, when an adult in your life makes a mistake, or when someone does something wrong, or someone violates you, your immediate reaction as an adult is not to hit that other adult and correct them. Your reaction is to tell them verbally, hey, don't do that thing. This is what's wrong.
Exactly.
Even if they've done it repeatedly. But with a child, a lot of y'all's inclination, and the inclination of the adults in my life, was to hit me. Sometimes using a belt, sometimes using physical items to hit me and punish me for doing something wrong, and then not explaining afterwards why you hit me.
Yeah.
So how am I supposed to differentiate that from abuse?
Right. You know, it's funny because I remember when I was like pregnant with Dylan and everything, that's when I would be a part of conversations regarding like hitting kids, right? Because I'm about to have a child of my own. It's relevant now. And my response has always been and will always be, if my manager can't holler off and bust me a slap for coming to work late, I shouldn't be able to beat up my child for making a mistake, especially when children are not born knowing how to navigate life. It's our job to teach them the rights and wrongs of like the world of existing. So how do I expect him to just know these things? And when he does something without knowing, like, I'm gonna hit him? That's weird. It's like you said, it's literally using your power to assert dominance.
And people always say like, oh, I'm not punching my child. I'm not like overdoing it. I'm just like spanking my child or like smacking them a little bit. Like, okay, fine. Whatever, if that's your logic. But at the same time, going back to that argument, if an adult in your life is doing something similar, is doing something wrong, is making a mistake, and often the adults in our lives make mistakes that are far more damaging to us as people than children.
Like children ever will.
You're not smacking them. You ain't spanking them. Like, you're not putting your hands on any other adult, but you're choosing to do that to a child.
You know, something just crossed my mind in this very moment that's fucking me up, right? I noticed that when we do think about those parameters where hitting is inappropriate, it's usually with somebody outside of our nucleus, right? It's usually a coworker, a stranger on the street. But low-key, people in romantic relationships be putting hands on each other.
Yeah.
Women find out their man is cheating and they busting these man hard slap. They flinging things across. So why is it acceptable for family to assault each other?
Possession.
But stranger, it's so weird to me. That shit just fucked me up. That shit just crossed my mind because I'm like,
it's the idea of possessing someone. It's the idea of owning someone. A lot of people, those same people who put their hands on their partners, because listen, let me tell you something. I've been in the relationship that I'm in now, going on 8 years, and it's never occurred to me, outside of being playful, because we don't physically like fight each other because like we like to throw down, but like playing, it's always,
you're an Aries, it makes sense.
Like, I like to make fuck, so sometimes I'll come smack the man and he asks and he'll beat me up, but
that's
like,
so cute. That's fun though. That's cute. Oh, I like
it's playful. But outside of that playfulness, I have never imagined myself putting my hands on Steven because I vex with he. I could never. It never even crossed my. No, let me not lie. sometimes it'll piss me off. I don't want to slap you.
Yeah.
And he just said the same thing to me. Sometimes you'll get me so mad that I just want to rag you up, but it never happens. We've never, even in the most heated of arguments, the first thing we do is go opposite ways.
I love that
Because
self-control. That self-control is unmatched. Oh my God. That's so beautiful.
My mind to gain his face, to hit he, to
yeah, that's crazy.
I would
to
never
me.
do that.
You know,
I would never do that.
I was recently, I don't remember who I was talking to. Oh, it might have been my friend Chantel. Hey, Chantel. I remember this was when I was like 19 and I was with somebody way too old for me. But in any case, I remember we were in an argument, and I'm not a violent person. I don't identify with it. I cannot relate to violence. Like, it's just not for me. When I resort to, if I have to resort to violence, I feel physically sick afterwards. Like, I just don't like, so I just don't do it. In any case, we're outside. I'm sitting on the hood of his car. We're having this argument, and he's getting on my motherfucking nerves. And I can feel inside my body that all I want to do is punch this man in the face. Like, I know that, like, if I, like, the thing that would make me feel good right now is punching this man in the face. And that's out of character for me. Mind you, I was only like 19 at the time. And I'm sitting there breathing. He's talking and doing his thing, and it's getting on my motherfucking nerves. And when he paused, I said, stop for 1 second, please. I said, I think it's time for you to go. And I think we need to revisit this conversation tomorrow. Because in this moment, I want to punch you in the face. And that's not me, and I don't think you deserve that. So I think you need to go. I literally said it to him exactly like that. First of all, he burst into tears, which annoyed the fuck out of me. He burst into tears when I said that. I can't believe you would say that to me. I said, would you rather me have said that or punched you in the face? Like, which one would you rather? Because right now, you're making me the bad guy for showing restraint. You're mad at me for telling you that. Would you have been happier if I just punched you? Would that have... It was just weird to me. Like, and granted, he did leave, and I wasn't even so much upset that he cried. I was upset that he felt like I was wrong for creating that space. For trying to, because for me, I'm always going to be conflict resolution is always going to be my top priority. So even in an argument, even if we vent in and we having a moment where we're going back and forth, conflict resolution is always my top priority. So for me, I'm like, dude, I could punch you right now, or I could just say we need to take a break.
Yeah. There's some people who, when you try to take like those conflict resolution steps, who view you wanting to step away as you caring less about the situation that you're trying to resolve.
Yeah.
But and then like there's people who see abuse as love. Like,
that's
right
true.
now, I don't even know how to pronounce that little girl name, but there's this girl who keeps going viral, and she's with this rapper who also, I don't know his name, and
wow, we're definitely viral.
We're such aunties. They keep going viral for being abusive to each other. Like,
oh my God.
They keep videos of them physically fighting, keep appearing online, and there's people who conflate that to like, wow, these people really go hard for each other because they'll fight and come back together and fight and come back together, and it's no, they are involved in a abusive relationship.
Absolutely.
And it's incredibly fucked up, and we should stop entertaining this type of bullshit. Like,
yeah,
that girl is in danger. Like,
yeah, they're and the thing is she's definitely in danger. They're both in danger.
Yeah,
they're both, like, it's crazy. You remember when Megan got shot, Andrea said, like, if her man don't shoot she, then he clearly don't love her. Like, people really, I'm glad you said that, because that's how normalized like cruelty has become, where people associate that kind of treatment to dedication, and you being so in love and so wrapped up in somebody that you are willing to cause them harm. I'm sorry, if you love me so much that you want to harm me, bitch, I'm gonna do some voodoo or something, but you're not gonna be in my life for much longer. I'm just be frank, because I'm calling on my ancestors to get you out of here. Like, get the fuck up out of here.
I came from a household where I had a father who, in my childhood, dealt with substance abuse at a very significant level, and I never witnessed the physical abuse, right? But I witnessed the threat of physical abuse often. This was a father who also, like a typical Caribbean or Hispanic father, would also beat his children if we did something he didn't want us to do, right? And it was excessive, right? Like, my father used to lose his fucking temper, right? And thank God my father is in a much better place. My father is not dealing with those problems anymore, and we've had time to heal those wounds. But in my childhood, I witnessed my mother experience a lot of emotional and psychological abuse.
Yeah.
So when I got older and had my own experiences with it, I got to the point now where if my friends are involved in relationships like that, my tolerance for it is so fucking low that people will get vexed with me at how I'm not gonna say dramatic, but how far I will take it if I find out that my friend is in an abusive relationship. Like, we're not even talking about it. Like, what are the steps we need to take to end this fuck? Because like, my tolerance for that shit so fucking low that I remember one time I fell out with a friend because she hit her girlfriend. They got into an argument, and she claimed that because they got into an argument, she blacked out and she hit her girlfriend, right? And whatever it is happen. If you black out, whatever. But when she was trying to explain it to me, I was so apathetic, and she was crying. Like, she was like visibly upset at the fact that, you know, this thing had happened. But I remember her just saying like, I blacked out and da-da-da-da-da. And I kept going back to like, but you hit her. Yeah. You put your hands on her. Like, you hear yourself right now. And I remember her feeling like I wasn't being empathetic to the fact that obviously she was struggling with something, like they were going through a lot, but I kept focusing on like, but you hit her.
It's, you know, and the thing is I think when you've experienced a certain level of abuse, it's almost impossible to empathize with somebody that you see as an abuser, right? And that's not saying your friend is an abuser, but once you know that somebody has crossed that line, it's hard to empathize with them because like I remember I had a friend who he came to me and he claimed he felt bad. I don't believe him. We're not even friends anymore, right? Because it was something similar where he said him and his girlfriend, who they had no business being together in the first place, but he claims that they was in a bad argument and he like, I think he said he like grabbed her or he like put his hands around her throat or some wild fuck, and I lost it. I fucking lost it. I was like, first of all, the fact that you thought that I was the friend to call with this shit, first of all, she needs to leave you. Is she okay? Like, I was fucking livid. It was the same thing. And he kept being like, oh, but she was disrespecting me. And that's the fucking solution, you dumb bitch.
She was disrespecting me for side choker.
Yeah,
she was hurting my feelings. So
and I said, how about you have some fucking respect for yourself and not be with somebody that you feel is going to disrespect you instead of trying to bring her down? Like, are you dumb? Like, I remember being so angry.
I don't think at the time she understood why I was as upset as I was. And I think she expected me to empathize with her because she was my friend and her girlfriend at the time was, I don't want to say the girlfriend wasn't my friend, but she was my friend first.
She was your friend, yeah.
And I think she expected me to kind of bypass the abuse and empathize with her, and I couldn't. And I remember being so fucking angry that when like I left that conversation with her and I was talking to my other friend, I was like, dude, right now I'm like triggered. Like, I'm thinking about everything I've experienced in my life, and I'm thinking about the fact that her excuse for hitting this person was I blacked out and I had no self-control, and like,
that's bullshit. And if that's the case, and let me tell you something, and I'm gonna just say it, and I don't care if this is extreme, or I know that I have a tendency to be a little black and white, but if you don't have that, if you're able to lose control so easily, you don't have no business being involved with other people. That's just the way I see it. If you can't control your responses, if you can't control your impulses, you don't deserve to share space with people. Because why should people be subjected to that? Why should anybody be why should anybody live with the fear of potentially being on the other end of your blackouts? You don't deserve to have people in your life. Be alone and learn to control yourself.
It's honestly, it ties back to society being so okay with abuse in so many different forms that sometimes people like to blur the lines of what abuse is. It's like, oh, this thing happened one time, so obviously I lost my sense of self-control and it's never going to happen again. When what people don't realize is like abuse builds up in different ways.
Absolutely.
Like,
yes, it does.
It builds up. There are stages of abuse that people can go to. Somebody who is okay verbally abusing somebody is somebody who might likely one day be okay physically abusing somebody, because what's the difference? You're still harming somebody.
You're still harming somebody. So I came across something on TikTok recently. Yo, TikTok? Let me find out TikTok is like an Ivy League institution, because I don't be learning so much on that fucking app, right? this one of my mutuals actually had shared the typical steps of abuse, right? Something that a lot of abuse victims have in common, especially those that are surviving like physical abuse. And it always starts with a partner who starts with like, it's little things like pinches. They're checking your tolerance, like how much you can tolerate, and it eventually works up, and then it's the arguments, it's the belittling, and then it's them blacking out and either slapping you or punching you, and it gets worse and worse over time because they're pretty much pushing the boundary to see how much they can get away with before you leave, right? First of all, watching that shit, it fucked me up because my son's dad used to pinch me when we first got together a lot. He used to pinch me hard. They like to do it when you're around other people as well to see how you're going to respond in front of those people. And at the moment when it was happening, I didn't know that that's what was going on. I just know he had this random times he would just fucking pinch me. I had a perpetual black and blue on this arm right here because anytime we were in the car driving, he would pinch me really hard and make it like this joke. The first time he did it, I was like, what the fuck? And I laughed along, but it hurt so bad. I did not like it. Within that, I want to say in our first 2 months of the relationship, he would randomly pinch me and do little things, but I would always do it back. And eventually it stopped, right? And then of course in arguments, he would be so fucking mean in arguments, right? And I had to teach myself to give it back, to be really mean, just the same. And just watching that video where she said it graduates from the pinching, and they do little things under the table when you're around company to see how you would respond. Because if you give a big dramatic response, they know they're not going to get away with abusing you. But if you kind of push it away or table it a little bit, then they know that they can go even further with it.
I want to talk about this too because I think sometimes abuse can also start with love bombing. Love bombing is essentially like excessive displays of affection and attention. Basically, that person trying to buy you in and show you that they're this amazing person and you deserve the wall, and just like it's used to manipulate you into seeing that this person is this nice, wholesome person who would never harm you, who loves you more than anything in the world. You are the center of their universe. And they use that as a way of making you codependent on them, of making you trust them in a way to where when they start enacting the physical or emotional harm, it's hard to kind of differentiate the abuser from the person who was love bombing.
Yes.
A lot of times when this does happen, this abuser they'll also start to isolate you from your friends and family because in their love bombing they'll convince you like, oh, we only need each other. Like you don't need these other people. They don't treat you as well as I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
You shouldn't hang with these people. Like they definitely start to like pull you away from your support system so that when the abuse starts, you don't have anybody who is in your circle telling you like, hey, this person abusing you, like you should, leave.
You need to,
and it's important to highlight that because a lot of times people always ask, why is it so hard for victims to just leave situations of abuse? And sometimes that's the reason, because that person has made the victim so dependent on them that financially leaving sometimes is impossible.
It's not possible.
We talked about financial and economic abuse. Sometimes there's children involved. Sometimes psychologically that person has kind of fucked with your self-esteem so much to the point where you do not see yourself outside of that relationship, even
and
with
also
the abuse.
And another factor is sometimes you think that you're the cause of it. You think that if you, a lot of the times, victims of abuse feel like, oh, if I would listen more, or if I would,
if I hadn't upset them.
If I hadn't upset them. And in addition to that, like you said, that love bombing phase, it kind of blurs your perception of what this person is really like. So there's a part of you that always thinks that you're gonna, and this is something that your inner child is doing actually. It's like a part of complex PTSD where you not so much trick yourself, but you hold out hope for one day being back to that stage where they love bombed you, basically. And they do this, I think it's called hoovering. After the abuse has started and you're kind of in that weird, like discarding limbo-y phase, what happens is when the person who's abusing you feels like they're possibly going to lose you, they love bomb you all over again. They start treating you just as well as they did. And then you end up getting confused and falling right back into the trap. And it's a never ending cycle. And it's troubling, to say the least. Because even years after the abuse, you find people who are healing or who have you know, who find themselves still missing the person who abused them. Sometimes you have people who even question, sometimes people who are like victims of abuse or survivors rather, they find themselves kind of wondering like, maybe I was the problem. You know, like maybe they've changed, maybe it's a lot. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate.
I remember, so there are situations now where me going through therapy and me doing like all my mental health work and learning terms for things, there's so much in my life that I'm starting to be able to like identify as like, oh, that was sexual assault, that was abuse, that was this, that was that, like starting to kind of like, oh, that shit happened to me, wow, I did not see it as that at the time.
Yes.
I remember being in high school, and I've talked about this person on the podcast in a very like whatever type of way. I remember being in a relationship in high school where I really, really liked this person, and the person was aware of how much I liked them, and behind closed doors they would like shower me with attention and basically tell me how pretty I was and da 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 da, but then like in front of our friends they would like insult me, and they would like just, and it would be like I'll use the butt of the joke for today, like everybody roasting each other, but like it would happen with me more often than everybody, like he would like insult me for the other people, but behind closed doors on my phone he would be like gassing me up, telling me how much he liked me, just all of this shit, right? And people would see that. I think in high school I was like, oh, that's just how teenage boys act.
Teenage boys are, that kids will be kids, boys will be boys, very
but in his, I don't know if I could call it love bombing, but basically whenever he would be being very sweet to me and complimenting me and like gassing me up, he would also be commenting on my body a lot. And he would always tell me things in like a complimentary way, but then would add like, man, if you did this, you would be so like, you would be so fine here, as like everybody would want you. Like he would say shit like that to me so casually, and it would bother me, but because I liked him so much, and because again he was showering me with compliments at the same time, I would take it as, oh, well, I need to prove myself to this person. So he basically would tell me, like, you so pretty and you have such a nice body. Like, if you was to lose weight, Deidre, looking back at my high school self, I now understand why I have the issues that I have that I'm trying to work through as it relates to, like, food and my size and all of that stuff. Because Deidre, probably 160 pounds in high school.
Yeah.
But at the time, being anything other than skinny was considered negative, was considered ugly and not attractive. I thought that I was like much more unattractive than I actually was because of how people would speak to me, especially him, because he would compliment me and then add the butt as like a, you there for me, like you're attractive to me, but it's not enough, right?
It's not enough. Yeah. Oh my God.
And this is the same person who finally asked me to be in a relationship with him, and then 2 weeks later decided that he changed his mind. Come to find out, he broke up with me because he actually liked my best friend, and they had also been talking and they started dating, and I did not fucking react well. Okay, I talked shit on High Five on social media. This is how long
High motherfucking five.
There was a conversation on High Five between me and some other girls who knew about the situation. It was a funny inside joke. We cracking up. I'd laugh with my friends, doing what I need to do to get over the situation because I'm hurt about it, right? His response to that is basically to pull me up, right, with his group of friends and embarrass me.
What?
In front of all our other friends, and basically said, how long were we dating for you to be acting like this? Literally berated me to the point where like I was in tears in school, right?
Oh my God.
And I remember in my head, I couldn't pinpoint if I was wrong or if he was wrong or if I was overreacting or like I was so fucked up in my head about it. And I was so embarrassed. And then like him and my best friend were dating and everybody just kind of move on. So mind you, this was not the last of it between me and this person. When him and her eventually broke up, she ended up moving away. He came back to me to start doing the same thing over and over again. The, oh, you so attractive, oh this, oh that, but you would be so much more attractive if like the same cycle, right?
Yeah.
So we went through it basically for all my 4 years of high school.
Oh my gosh.
Even probably like shortly after he graduated. And I didn't think of it as emotional abuse until I got older, and I was like, oh,
Yeah, that's fucking wild.
that was emotional abuse. Like,
It definitely was.
and you know, I've talked about it on the podcast, the whole like, oh, this dude, and he dated 2 different best friends, okay, 2 different ones, because at one point I got closer to another girl and they ended up dating. I was like, what the fuck going on? Anyway, but looking back, I'm like, yeah, that was emotional abuse, because
Absolutely.
for you to privately be telling me all of these things and like psychologically like fucking with me, and then publicly for it to be a completely other story, and then for you to be gaslighting me and making me feel like I was crazy for reacting the way, like, that shit was such a
That's a mind fuck.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like, it was such a mind-blowing experience to go through, but because abuse is so normalized, and because it wasn't physical, and because he wasn't outright saying like, you's a dumbass bitch, like, because it wasn't like vitriolic the way he would speak to me, I never connected it to emotional abuse until I was much older.
And that's the thing, because that's how you usually go. Like, you don't have the tools to know that as a teenager. Yeah, and then the thing is, our parents, and let's also be clear, and we talked about this last episode, the 2 generations before us didn't have the fucking tools neither. Okay, these tools are just being proven to be effective, right? Because those tools were created back when our parents and their parents were, you know, running the show, but those tools hadn't really been proven yet. Now these tools are proven effective, so we're the ones who are truly like pouring those tools into our children. So by the time our kids are teenagers, they're going to be able to call that shit out. Because even right now, Gen Z is not playing. Gen Z don't hesitate to let you know when they're being gaslighted. Like, you know, I'm so, first of all, I'm really sorry you had that experience. That's fucking bananas. That's fucking insane.
I'm sorry you had your experience, because every time you talk about like your experience with your ex, I just want to go find a man and break he fucking
But you
ankles.
know what's
like,
crazy, hey Isa? The same way you're realizing now that you were experiencing abuse, I'm realizing it now too. In the relationship, the only point that I could pinpoint as abuse was like how verbally abusive he was, right? Because that motherfucker was mean. And it's always when random like bits of information is shared with me, and then I kind of realize like, oh shit, that happened to me. Also, I experienced love bombing as well from him. Like, everything that they point out as like patterns of abuse, I'm like, the fact that I experienced all that and didn't realize in the moments that it was abused. I went through that period of him essentially trying to isolate me from my friends and telling me that I need to learn how to say no more. He made it seem as though my friends were taking advantage of me. Like,
but really what it was I want your attention, so you need to say no to these other people.
Yes. Anytime I wanted to do something that didn't involve them, we would get in an argument. If I wanted to go out with my friends, or if I was just doing something and it didn't involve them being a part of it with me, we would get in bad arguments. I remember I had like my friends that I used to hang out with, and they are lesbians, right? And I had made last minute plans to hang out with them. I guess he just assumed that because it was Friday that I would just be spending the weekend with him, because we didn't live together. He hit me up. I was like, hey, are you coming over tonight? And I was like, actually, no, I'm hanging out with my girlfriends. And he got so upset. Well, what makes you think I didn't want to hang out with you? I've been looking forward to spending time with you all week. What makes you think I wouldn't want to hang out with my woman after a long week? And I was like, well, I'm sorry. Like, it's not like we had plans. Like, and I guess I felt bad, but he expected me to cancel on them. And I was like, well, I'm not going to cancel on my friends. Like, I already made plans with that. And then he got even more upset. And then we would text. We were having like a nasty text argument. And that man went as far. And I think at this point he was on my phone cussing me. And this man told me, oh my God. He said, I hope those bitches gang rape you. And I was like, what the fuck? And I remember just like hanging up the phone, and I went and I hung out with them. And I remember I had stuff by his house. And at that point, I was like, this relationship is over. Like, we're done. And the next day, he let me know, come get your shit. Like, this man was really vexed with me. I went to pick up my stuff. My stuff was sitting outside, like, and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, that was such an extreme, like, overreaction, right?
It was.
So he was like, well, I'll give you a ride home. Like, I hopped in his car so he could give me a ride home. And he felt entitled to an apology. He felt like I should apologize to him. And
so he put you in a situation where he had control, as in, I'm driving the car.
Yeah.
I gonna make you come get your stuff.
Yes.
But you ain't gonna get him the way you want to get him. And right. I'm going to put you in a situation where I'm in control. I'm the driver here.
Yeah. So he wanted me to apologize for essentially ditching him, even though we never had plans, right? So I grabbed my stuff. We're in the car, and halfway home, And this is on St. Croix. So it's not like it's up here where I could just get an Uber. And he just decides that it was too much for him. And he was like, you know what? Actually, no, I'm gonna just have to let you out here. And the thing is that it goes back to wanting to kind of control somebody, and you want to isolate them from having people in their lives, right? And I don't think he knew that, like, there's people like a call. First of all, I would have just get a taxi, right? I would have just pay a taxi man to take me all the way home. Like, so I hit up Morgan, and Morgan was like, I come in for you. Morgan was livid. By the time I left with Morgan, I guess he changed his mind and decided to come back and look for me. At this point, I'm already gone. Now he blowing up my phone. He texting me, I'm so sorry. Let me give you a ride home. I'm already on my way home. So I got home, and I think he went like he was like looking around for me. And then he showed up at my house, and he's like in the yard with this big dramatic display, and he's apologizing and he's crying. And I'm so sorry I treated you like that. And I'm just like, my dude, like, what the fuck? And mind you, this is before Dylan. So obviously I got back with him. Mm-hmm. But now looking back, I'm like, wow, Deidre, like, I understand why people tend to ask people who like survived abuse, like, why did you stay? But it's like, nobody really has an answer to that, right? As I've healed and I've learned my worth, right? I know that is wildly unacceptable. I grew up witnessing volatile relationships. I grew up my own mother used to treat me like that. So that was a normal relationship to me. Anything that felt like an inconvenience to her, she would lash out. So for me, my first serious relationship was with somebody just like my fucking mother. In the moment, it was just like another argument between me and my boyfriend. But now as I'm looking back, I'm like, Deidre, that fuck was wild. This man like put you in danger. This man wished harm on you. This man was homophobic. He was just so many terrible things. But what got us back together was what? Him apologizing, him crying. And then of course back to the love bombing, and then doing all these nice gestures to make me feel better. And I'll never do that again. And that's why people who are survivors and victims of abuse stay, because that's the cycle. It's not constant berating. It's a literal cycle. It's these ups and downs. There was a point where I was able to differentiate the ups from the downs. And I recognized that it's not necessary for the downs to be so deep, right? Because I got to this point where, of course, my prefrontal cortex had started was fully developed, and the math just wasn't mathing. And I remember kind of sitting with myself during another one of our arguments, and I was like, this relationship don't have no kind of balance or flow. Things are either really good or they're really fucking awful, but there's no in between. And I feel like a relationship should be right in the middle of that. There shouldn't be, because it's impossible for there to just be.
It shouldn't be so drastically.
It shouldn't be so down. Yes. And that was what I was like, it should not be this intense. Sometimes I have a hard time forgiving myself for getting to the point where a child got involved, because it took me becoming a mom to say, hell fucking no, this has to end. He was always so good to Dylan. And that's another thing, was because
that was another layer to the abuse.
Yes, he was such a good, but
you
even
can't get rid of me. I'm a great father.
But in addition to that, and this is the real mindfuck here, Isa, the things that a lot of women struggle with when it comes to partners and co-parenting, I didn't struggle with. That man took such good care of me when I was pregnant with Dylan. Part of the mindfuck was he was mean to me when it came to being my boyfriend, but when it came to being the father of my child, he was an excellent father. And in addition to that, he treated me like he treated me the way a pregnant woman deserves to be treated.
That same scenario I could connect to my situation in high school, where, thinking back to my father used to treat my mother like shit. But my father used to treat me like I would have sent out his fucking universe.
Oh, God.
So to see the same person treat my mother one way and then come back to me and be like, use my baby, use my everything, da-da-da-da-da.
That's a mind.
Of course, it was normal to me that somebody would do that to me.
That's what was formed in your brain when you witness your relationship between your parents versus your relationship with your dad. Dad is gonna treat me like a queen and treat mommy like shit. And so when I am old enough to have a partner, he gonna treat me like shit and treat our daughter like a queen. Yeah. You know, like those, like relationships are modeled.
It's rough out here in these streets, especially again because abuse is so normalized. People feel like you have to go through hardship in order to like earn this badge of honor in a relationship. And in my head I'm like, yeah, but those struggles as much as I don't even agree with the struggle part, because like, yeah, Steven and I have experienced our struggles, but it's not the state of our relationship.
Right.
But even with that, our struggles never involved abuse.
That
Never
part.
involved abuse.
That part.
Like,
part.
Because even in friendships, like I've had friendships in my life where like a friend expects to be able to just like insult me or talk to me however,
That's
or
crazy.
do whatever the fuck they want, and then like come back and like, everything good, we're best friends. Like,
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I don't think abusive relationships among friends is a topic that comes up ever.
expecting somebody to just like take your shit over and over and over and over and be like, no, but we're friends,
But
we're
we're
best
good,
friends,
right? We're best friends.
we're
Yeah.
good, we're best friends.
And you know what? And that's like abusing your position in somebody's life. And that's like, when it's extended family, that's usually how the abuse looks, is because we're family, I'm going to treat you however the fuck I want, and you can't leave, we're family. And that's what friends tend to do.
You know what'll fucking send me? At the end of the day,
That's
your
the
family. At the end of the day,
Bitch.
fuck them. Like,
Fuck them
what do you
motherfucker.
mean?
Mhm.
Abusive people convince themselves that they are the center of your universe and that there is no way that you could possibly live life without them.
Yes.
And if they don't come into the situation already with that dynamic, so for example, a family member, they try to build that dynamic. So
They
love
do.
bombing, like, they will try to make themselves the center of your world so that it's not even possible that you
Yep.
cannot forgive me for this thing because
Yes.
you're my best friend or you're my girlfriend or you're my
And
wife.
ladies,
Like,
ladies, I need y'all to protect your wombs, because that's why these men be pumping and dumping.
you know what's something I want to touch on though? I do want to make space for how men tend to suffer abuse.
Oh,
right?
absolutely, because men do experience abuse as well.
Yeah, they go through physical and emotional and psychological abuse. And a part of me feels like a lot of the times when men have a female abuser, because I mean, men could go through abuse in same-sex relationships too, but when men have a female abuser, I feel like often the abuser takes advantage of toxic
Of her womanhood, of her
and
womanhood. Yeah.
in order to abuse that man, because they know that men have this hesitance to admit weakness or to
Yes.
admit emotional distress or to admit abuse because they're men. So
Yup.
everybody think, oh, I could abuse this man because he ain't gonna come out and say,
He
oh,
ain't
my
gonna-
woman beating me. Like,
Exactly. And so for one, because it's so frowned upon for a man to physically abuse a woman, women also weaponize that.
I want us to create more spaces for people to feel comfortable coming forward about abuse, especially men, because we know that they're less likely to do it. But I think a lot of victims of abuse are less likely to do it because, like we talked about, you convince yourself that it's illogical. You convince
Yes.
yourself that you stay, so obviously you deserve it, or you came back to that person, so obviously you deserved it. Like, and I just want Aya to know, like, at no point do you deserve for a person to be cruel or violent towards you
Absolutely.
for any fucking reason.
None
Even if that
whatsoever.
person angry with you, even if that person doesn't like something you did, even if you did something wrong, unless
That's
you
true.
physically hit someone and they are defending themselves, you
Yeah,
don't
you don't deserve to be hit.
fucking cruelty and violence, or even psychologically, like you don't deserve that shit.
You
Even
don't.
when we resolve conflict, that's the reality of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can be verbally abusive to other people sometimes when we're angry and we have mean shit to say, but that doesn't
And that's
mean
not
we
okay
resolve it.
either. I feel like in the last episode when we were talking about ego, I referenced that I know that when I am operating from a dark place, especially when it comes to my ego, I tend to really go for the jugular. That's not okay. So there has to be like a fine line, right? And so I would always justify those, like, I guess those abusive behaviors with, well, you should not cross me. You should not cross me. And the reality is Deidre, when you realize that somebody continuously crosses your boundaries, remove them from your life. You don't have to,
But also, so what about in a situation where, like, you may not want to remove that person from your life? Like, is there something that person could say to you, like a code word or something, where you would catch yourself like, I'm doing it again. Because sometimes when I get
you know what, that's
angry,
a good idea. That's a really good idea.
Myself.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And I'm glad you said that, because Diamond told me that one time during one of our arguments, I said something to her. First of all, that blacking out thing is real. And I learned this about myself in the last like 2 years. I didn't realize that happens to me. And when I black out, I don't get physically violent, but I say really fucked up things.
Yeah, and we don't have a lot of control when we're that level of like pissed off.
Yeah. And so maybe that's a good idea. And I think I will come up with a code word. And when I find that I'm creating a very meaningful and deep relationship with somebody, I'll share that with them. Let's come up with a code word as a couple, so that if I'm getting super angry and I'm saying fucked up things, you can say that code word, and I could take accountability and we could like step away, because I'll be going too far.
Before we wrap up, I do want to highlight the fact that like I have witnessed multiple friends get into abusive situations, and when they were in abusive situations, didn't know how to talk to them about it. I didn't know how to support them. I didn't know. I knew what signs to look for, though. I will say that. So talk to your friends. Like, make sure that you are conscious of how your friends act when they are in their like happy place, when they're in a really good mental state. And that's in general. Like, pay attention to how your friends act and what their demeanors are when they're in a really, really good place versus when they're not. Because a lot of times, like, abuse won't always be physical signs. You're not going to see the black eye sometimes, or the black and blues. Sometimes your friend is just going to stop hanging with you. Sometimes your friend is going to become a bit more reserved. Sometimes your friend might act completely and totally fucking fine, but their partner's demeanor around you might be a bit different. And you need to feel comfortable checking in with your friends and being like, yo, is everything okay? Keeping in mind that sometimes they ain't gonna tell you what's happening. Again, it takes, I think, up to 7 times for somebody to finally leave a abusive relationship. So just talk to your friends and pay attention to them, and don't let time go by knowing that there's signs of abuse or signs of something going wrong without you making yourself available to that person.
Why are they still your friend?
And let me tell us something. Going back to the fucking book that we talk about, I know this episode long. Going back to the book, people were so thrown off that a girl said, she titled her book, I'm Glad My Mother Died. Let me tell you something. My sexual abuser, the day that motherfucker die, Ayo could give me that bullshit about not wishing people death.
Nah, fuck the dumb shit.
That bullshit about at the end of the day, that's a human being. That human being chose to do me harm. Guess what? When he died and he got and buried in Kings Hill or wherever the fuck else, I am fucking heel and toeing on that grave before the cement dry. You cannot tell an abuse victim how to respond to the abuser.
Yeah.
If she glad her mother dead, she glad her mother dead. If I read that book, you gonna be glad her mother dead too.
I'm glad her mama's dead.
That woman put her through so much shit.
That's so wild. That's so,
and it's the fact that she have to start her life over post abuse. That's something we don't talk about.
And I really want us to create a space for people, especially Black women, who choose to go no contact, especially with like their mothers. I'm starting to kind of find a little bit of a TikTok community of women who've chosen to go no contact with their mothers, because it's very uncomfortable to talk about. And even like majority of our listeners are from the Virgin Islands, so for one, a lot of them know who my mother be, a lot of them know who our mothers are, right? And it's uncomfortable to address, right? And the more I talk about it, the more comfortable I'll get, accepting it. But I really want us to kind of create that space, and I want to see it be normalized, because a lot of people never really get to grow to their full and truest potential, because the thought of going no contact with their family is so foreign, at least in our community. And I want to really address something that I remember it pissing me off, because I've seen a lot of Black therapists on TikTok go on, and they have the mindset that the reason why Black people need we have many reasons why we need more Black therapists. Let's be clear, because I'm on board of us needing more Black therapists. However, I remember seeing a lot of Black therapists say that a big part of why we need more Black therapists is because a white therapist would just encourage you to go no contact, but that's not customary for us, and that's not really acceptable for us. And Black people need therapists who understand and would not necessarily encourage them how to go no contact, but how to navigate those spaces in a way that's better suited for them. And I'm not on that motherfucking train. I actually want to be the Black therapist that says, fuck them people, go no contact. I want us to normalize Black people going no contact. And you know what?
That goes back to that cultural / identity form of abuse.
Yes.
Because a part of it too is cultural. You expect people in the Caribbean to tolerate certain behaviors because, we's family and family is like Black communities and communities of color, family dynamics are super important to us.
Yes.
So they expect
so
you
much,
because you place the importance on that to then tolerate abuse,
to tolerate anything
dynamics.
And it's wild. And I'm like, no, Black therapists, I want us to encourage our people to know their worth and be okay with walking away from a family structure that's abusive and fucking narcissistic, because you know what, you could create a new fucking family. I'm sorry.
Honestly, truly.
You're better off creating a new family system than remaining in one that's so fucking toxic. Just be like, no. Oh, I'm getting angry.
and let me put this out there, right? When I talked about my relationship with my mother on episode 1, it was coming from a place of us not having the relationship that I wish we would have had. But my mother and I have never had an abusive relationship, right? So I was able, after that episode came out, to go through my therapy and do what I needed to do. My mother and I haven't 100% like resolved our issues, but we're able to move forward and interact with each other, and like there's no like tension or anything like that. Like, I mean, there might be a little bit, but it's not to say me interacting with her on a continuous basis is continuing to bring me harm, right?
Right.
The difference is that with your relationship with your mother, the problem was the abuse. So continuing to interact with her and her behavior not changing,
that's the thing right there,
is to continue to tolerate the abuse. So while I could say, you know, at the end of the day, that's my mother, I get that she's not perfect, but I could accept that and I could move forward. It's completely different in your situation, because abuse, you can't excuse that by saying, well, at the end of the day, that's my mother. Like, it's not.
And then the thing is in her case, she still tries to talk to me the way she spoke to me when I was a child.
Exactly.
She still her behavior has not changed, and she doesn't have, and there's no willingness for it to change. And she feels justified in it. And I'm like, you know what? You have a right to be that person, and I have a right to not have you in my life. How about them apples?
Yeah.
It just is what it is, and I'm okay with that. You know, I'm okay with that.
Continuing to interact with my mom is not taking anything away from me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm able to still have positive interactions with her. Yes, there are still those things missing, like the affection and all of that stuff that I spoke about, but it's not, I am able to go to other places in my life and get that type of relationship from my friend circles, from mentors, from other people, and still have a different form of relationship with my mother, right?
Yeah.
But it would be very different if the things that she was doing that I had said I had a problem with was abuse, right? Yeah. Because then interacting with her would be taking shit away from me every single time. Yeah. For people to expect children or adults to continue interacting with parents and family members because a familiar relationship, when every single interaction is taking something away from me.
Yes. Like, and that's the thing, right? Because the reality is I sometimes I do miss my mom, especially when I really kind of started stepping fully into myself. Me and my mom have a lot in common as far as our interests go. And listen, I'm an Aquarius. She's a Gemini. You get two motherfucking air signs together, we talking for hours. I love the kind of conversations me and my mom used to have. But I had to kind of stop and ask myself, like, is it worth your sanity? Because it does take a lot of emotional labor to kind of go through that process of, like, I went through that point of, okay, I'm gonna just handle our relationship with a long-handed spoon, but then that takes up a lot of emotional space because those lines always get blurred. And it, you know, so I just had to say, you know what, Deidre, you're gonna have to stimulate yourself in that regard in other ways and just create and find your tribe. And my tribe right now is lit. I have a very wide tribe that has many tribes within it, if that makes sense. And I like it.
And the tribe I have now and the things that I am getting from them and the things that I'm getting from therapy and the work that I'm doing on my mental health, it's preparing me in such a way that, like, if I were to enter an abusive situation again, I think I would be better prepared to identify it sooner.
Oh, absolutely.
I ever had been in the past. Like, I don't want to say that there are people who are more susceptible to abuse than others, because abuse could happen to anybody, but there are situations where an abuser will more than likely try to attach themselves to a person because they realize that person has low self-confidence, that person doesn't have good relationships in their lives, that person is experiencing mental health issues, that person is disabled or of another marginalized, like people who are in situations where they cannot defend themselves, where they don't have a good support system, are like it's like fucking a free for all for abusers. It's because true. That's the type of people that they don't look for. They want to be able to quickly take control.
They look for the vulnerable.
Vulnerability. That's what they're looking for. So please know, if you're listening and you've ever been in a situation of abuse, one, it was absolutely not your fault. There is nothing, no situation, nothing you said, did, could have avoided that would have made it your fault, and it is entirely the fault of the person that chose to abuse you.
Big facts.
And secondly, know that you're not alone. Like, as much as you don't hear me and Deidre come out here and talk our shit and be confident, like, we both just spent time talking about the fact that we've been abused. Right. In multiple ways by multiple people, and it's because in those periods of our lives, like, those people took advantage of that, you know?
Facts.
But it doesn't make you any less of a person. Yes. You're still a bad bitch.
You're healing every single day, and there's going to be a point where, like, hey, as I said earlier, you're going to be able to identify an abuser way sooner. It's going to be so laughable. You are the baddest bitch there was, and that's the realty. That's why abusers are trying to latch to you, because what it is they see your light. They have low self-worth, and rather than trying to increase their self-worth, they'd rather bring yours down and try to put you under them and try to make you feel just as worthless as they feel. Yeah. And you are not worthless, and that's why these clowns be trying to attach themselves to you.
You a bad bitch.
And that's just that on that. Whoa!
With that being said, I know these last 3 weeks of episodes, listen, yeah, we gonna wrap this up. We gonna go take care of ourselves. That's another important thing. If you listening to this, make sure you do some self-care after you listen to this episode.
Oh, please, absolutely.
Please take care of yourself, because we talking about heavy topics. We're not therapists. We're not necessarily qualified to talk about this. This is just your friends talking shit on a mic, okay?
Yeah.
So do the work. Take care of yourself.
Please do. You owe it to yourself, and you deserve that work. You deserve it.
And for those of you who have experienced abuse, this is your social media assignment. Use @GoodUpPod on any social media platform, or #GoodUpTuesday, and send me a GIF of the dance you're gonna do when your abuser die.
Yes, honey. Yes, honey.
I want to see Harlem Shakes. I want to see Millie. I want to see all of that shit.
All of it. Oh my God. I'm going to look for the motherfucking dances right now. I already know the dance.
Send me that shit on social media. I really want to see it. And yeah, make sure you tag us. Make sure you talk about the podcast online. Leave a review if you've been enjoying the show in season 8. It's super easy to go on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a rating. If you're on Apple, make sure you actually type out the review and tell these people why they should be listening to us, okay? Or share us on social media, and if you enjoy the episode, tell your friends. You know, it helps us out a lot. And yeah, we'll see you right back here next week on the Good Up Podcast. Deidre, tell the people them bye.
Bye.
Good Up is hosted and produced by Deidre Ritter and Hey Isaac Quinones Ivory. Find us on all social media platforms @GoodUpPod. Use #GoodUpTuesday to continue the conversation and get access to exclusive bonus content at patreon.com/GoodUpPodcast.